Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Garwal. I'm CEO of Object Edge. And today I want to continue the conversation that we started last time around what are the costs around e-commerce. Now, last week, what we talked about was implementing a new e-commerce solution. And we talked about what it takes to implement for a medium-sized business, a small business, and a large business, an enterprise. Today, what I wanted to talk about is really what happens after you go live. Now, before we go into that, in case you missed it last time, everything I talk about today is really kind of premised on this foundation. And I think we have to align on that foundation in order for any of this to really resonate. And that is this belief that a technology implementation is really a solution. It's not the problem in of itself. So I think what we always need to keep in mind is this basic philosophy in terms of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about these costs, because your costs are going to be driven in terms of what you're looking to do. And that is this is that ultimately you've got a problem, a business problem, and you've got what happens when you solve that problem is some results. Business problem, solve the problem, get results. The implementation of an e-commerce solution is there to solve very, very specific business problems or business desires. So I'll give you an example, like what we talked about last time. Like ultimately, you might have a corporate level initiative. I need to increase my conversion rates by 20%. I need to boost my top line revenue. I need to cut costs, whatever that might be. And then ultimately, in order to execute that, to boost conversion, you're going to be looking for where are the friction points between your sellers and buyers in B2B. And you're going to try to introduce digital experiences potentially to help solve those problems and make that a less friction between your buyers and sellers. When you do that, you're solving a problem and you're expecting some sort of return. And so your investment is in the solution. So every time after you've gone live now with your site, what you really want to be looking to do is what are the very specific problems I'm trying to solve? And what do I think I'm going to get it when I solve those problems? So we'll break this into just two high-level parts. One, the hidden costs of implementing an e-commerce solution. And two, once you're live, how can you optimize? Like, how can you optimize your spend? And for me, optimize spend doesn't mean how do I spend less? Optimizing my spend is how do I get the most for every dollar I spend? How do I maximize my ROI? All right, so let's jump right into it. So hidden costs to watch out for are, and this is now on the more consumer grade platforms like Shopify, is understanding what your app and plugin subscription costs are. So understanding if you're doing a revenue share, what that's going to be if you scale, if you're trying to add applications or try to add plugins, what are the prices of those? So a lot of times when you go into a product discovery, you're going to see a lot of GWiz features, maybe some chat agents and whatnot. And most of the time, those aren't included in your actual software subscription cost. You're going to have to pay extra on the app and plugin. Now, usually those aren't too overly cumbersome, but it is a cost to watch out for. The other pieces, again, more on the consumer side sites, transaction fees and payment processing fees. Now, everyone's going to have to do this if you're collecting a credit card. But if you haven't, as it traditionally done a credit card business, if you've been more of a purchase order and a net 30, net 60, net 90 payment business, this might be something new for you. So you have to factor that in to your gross margins and your net margins. Then when we really get into the hidden cost of e-commerce is this concept that we discussed last time, but it impacts your implementation, but it also impacts after implementation. This concept between functionally out of the box and experience out of the box. And the example we gave last time was you can have a checkout out of the box. So if you were to do a platform discovery, you'll say, hey, do you have checkout? And every platform will have an out of the box checkout functionality, whatever that might mean. What it won't have is what's called, and it'll also have an out of the box checkout experience. However, you might not like the out of the box checkout experience. So yes, there'll be a payment button. Yes, there'll be a checkout flow. Yes, there'll be the possibilities to add or remove from cart. But you might not like the way that the experience happens. You might want a multi-screen experience. You might want a single screen experience. And you're going to have to most likely pay on the design side to actually design the right user experience and the right user interfaces, and then customize your platform in order to get there. And that gives me to it the next hidden cost is every time you deviate from what's called the out-of-the-box experience and the out-of-the-box functionality, you're adding to the long-term maintenance costs of your platform. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. It is just what it is. You're taking a piece of clay and molding it. Now, some platforms have already a pre-made mold for you. And if you're happy with that mold, if it does what you needed to do, which I hope actually most of the time it does, then your stand-up costs are going to be lower. And the more and more that you can leverage those out-of-the-box functions, the more cost-effective your solution is going to be, therefore maximizing your ROI. The more that you have to customize because there's something that you think you need, the more you should be aware that it's going to increase your long-term costs and obviously the implementation costs. And then finally, and this is a good thing again, scalability costs more as you grow your business. So depending on your licensing structure, you might be paying by order, you might be paying on revenue, you might be paying on number of server nodes, whatever it is, the more volume and traffic that you put onto a platform, the more that you're going to have to pay for it. So just factor that into your long-term cost analysis, that as you grow your revenues up to a certain point, beyond that point, you're also going to be growing your costs, not at a linear level, ideally, but it is still a scalability of cost, right? So app and plugin subscription, or app and plugin subscriptions, transaction fees and processing, design and customization experiences to make the functionality, the experiences that you want, and then the additional cost of scalability. So what can you do to optimize those costs? And again, not drive the cost down fundamentally, but how do you maximize your return on the investments that you're making? Well, number one is I think you should start with a minimal viable product. And I know that goes back to the implementation side, but oftentimes in B2B, we are introducing digital experiences to remove friction points between sellers and buyers in analog experiences. And we're all taking a guess in terms of what that digital experience needs to be. So for example, your customers might be coming to you and saying, hey, I would love to get my quotes within 30 minutes. And your sales reps are saying, well, I can't because it takes me 3 days to get the right pricing because of all these things that I have to do. And in the back end, technology is saying, well, of course it takes 3 days because we've got all these complex rules in our ERP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, whatever the legitimate reasons are, the customers are saying, or the buyers are saying, hey, I'd love to get a quote within 30 minutes. And your guys are saying, well, it's going to take me 3 days. I'm just giving an example. So what's going on there? We will then say, as a what does better look like, what we want to do is we wanted to be able to deliver quotes within 30 minutes. Now, what does that experience in itself look like? Well, now you're taking a guess. So rather than spending a whole bunch of money in customizing the experience of what a quote looks like, leverage the out-of-the-box flows of your solution that should have a quoting flow and say, hey, this is an MVP. Try this out. What do you think? And you're going to think it's ugly. You're going to think that it's not what you want. And it's probably yes and yes. It might not be too pretty and it might not be what you want. But so what? It's better than what you had. And fundamentally, you're doing a trial with your customers and say, hey, before it used to take you 3 days to get a quote. Now it's going to take you 3 hours. That's a big improvement from 3 days. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? How can we improve? Make them a part of your journey. So start with a minimal viable product, leveraging as many out-of-the-box features and experiences as possible. Then heavily prioritize your next essential features. And this is where product planning comes in. You can almost think of your e-commerce channel as a product now. And what you're doing is you're taking your user feedback and you're saying, hey, I want to optimize and prioritize my essential features. How do you prioritize? It's not because of the loudest yellers. It's what's going to drive you with the most return on that investment. So if your smallest customer, that's the biggest pain in the butt, keeps on telling you that I need feature X, and that's going to cost you $50,000, but your biggest customer is asking for feature Y, and it's going to cost you $10,000, you're going to do feature Y. Don't worry about just the loudest customer complaining. Do what's going to drive the most revenue for you. Then leverage any existing assets that you might have. So when you're launching your MVP, for example, try not to pay for a whole redesign up front. Try to leverage your existing style sheets, your existing style guidelines. A good partner will be able to incorporate those into a quote unquote out of the box experience for a really, really minimal fee. When you're investing in your platform, make sure that you understand what it is that you think you're going to want to get to and that your platform is scalable to get you there. So we talked about how scalability is actually a cost, but scalability is a cost and it's not linear with your revenue, because ultimately as your costs scale on, as your costs grow on scalability, your revenue should be doing this. It's a linear growth in scalability costs, but a hyperbolic growth in revenue achieved. And so what you don't want to have happen is that you pick a platform that isn't able to scale to where you want. And kind of on a technical note, don't build all your features and work around your platform to get to the features that you want. At this day and age, if you are a typical B2B organization doing between 300 million to, let's say, 5 billion in revenue, you don't need to heavily customize any solution. Even you might say, I've got really complex product sets or I've got really complex flows. Today's platforms like Salesforce, they're able to handle those flows, leveraging not heavily custom code, but leveraging the configurations. And I'm not saying nothing is customizable. And yes, configuring the platform takes time and money, but try to not customize the platforms as much as possible up front. You're going to have to customize down the road, most likely, but up front, don't heavily customize. And then what my last piece of advice in optimizing your e-commerce cost is measure, right? There's an age-old adage that you can't manage, or you can't manage what you can't measure. And it's an adage because it's true. Too many times people will go with an out-of-the-box Google Analytics implementation and they will just put in a Google tag and they'll say, okay, let me see what I get. That's not nearly enough to be able to understand where your customers need your help. There are now solutions out there where you can actually legally, leveraging Clickstream, build a map of where people are clicking all over your site. So you can understand where people are confused. You can understand what pages are being loading slow and which ones aren't. You can collect feedback on the site. You can do so much more stuff than just look at Google Analytics reports. And that small investment up front will lead to a large ROI down the road because it'll give you a lot more data to manage your solution and that to measure your solution, in which then you can manage your solution. So tips to optimize implementation costs: start with an MVP, right? No matter how much pushback you get, it's so critical that you don't overspend on your initial release because you're going to have to redo a lot of stuff. Prioritize essential releases based on ROI and ideally which customers and your best customers are getting impacted. Leverage existing assets where possible. A good partner should be able to integrate your brand assets to make your out-of-the-box experience look like yours, your brand. Invest in a scalable platform you don't want to have to re-implement because you invested in a platform that was cheap up front, but then once you hit a certain level of scale, it can no longer scale and it's taking 10 minutes to load a page. And you want to be able to, you want to invest in your monitoring up front so that you can measure what's going on, and then that way you can manage. When you're going to be spending on maintaining your platform, you should break your spend up into 4 concepts. The 4 areas that you want to plan your investments on is, of course, support. And it's really meaningful here that the people that are going to be doing your innovation, the people that are going to be doing your support are going to be fundamentally different people. And that's just a function of the market. Your costs to support your platform are going to be lower than your cost to enhance and modernize your platform. So have a bucket of spend reserved for providing support: 8x5, 7x5, 7x8, 24x7, whatever you might need. Just plan for that. You're going to have a budget for supporting your platform. And that is going to be developers who are generally newer, lower cost of ownership. If you're looking at offshore rates, you're looking at that $40 to $45 an hour. If you're on something like a Salesforce or a Commerce Tools or a Magento, if you're looking near shore, you want to be in that $75 to $85 an hour range, and onshore kind of ranges 125 to 175. Then you're going to have your enhancements bucket of work. Enhancements are going to require architecture. They're going to require some sort of project management. That's going to be your next tier of developer. And depending on how complex your enhancements are going to be, you're going to want an architect on there as well. Development prices there offshore in a hot market like Salesforce, you're looking at 50 to $55 an hour, maybe 85 to $100 an hour in nearshore, and anywhere from 150 to 250 onshore. The third bucket of area that you want to invest in is really, and you might have this in-house, is the ability to read your data well. So having someone new that's never looked at a Google Analytics report or the right tagging of a Google Analytics report or a Tableau report, and trying to just guess is a big waste of money. Now, if you don't have anyone in-house, get a partner that has the ability to do that work and then pair them with somebody internally. Someone just needs to be taught what data to look for. So when you get a partner, make sure that you put one of your own internal people on there so that they can learn and understand how to read e-commerce data. And the fourth place that you want to invest is an internal expense, is invest in your stakeholders to be committed to the platform so that they can understand and give you the time to understand what are the next quarter's releases, right? So there's four layers of cost here: support, enhancements, analytics and the ability to read your data. And then finally, the internal stakeholders that can help decide and define based on priorities, and they have to donate their time now to really define what are the next quarter's worth of releases. All right. So with that, thanks guys for listening. Really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, just drop us a comment below. Like and subscribe the videos if you're watching this on YouTube, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.